Hey everybody, welcome to Beauty at Work. We are in between seasons at the moment, so in the meantime, I want to share with you a series of panel discussions from a symposium that we organized in Montreal in October 2025. This event was the launch of a new international research project called Can Beauty Save the World? The project is funded by the John Templeton Foundation. The panels feature discussions between philosophers, historians, musicologists, neuroscientists, social scientists, religious studies scholars, and practitioners from a variety of domains, exploring the meaning and power of beauty in a secular age. I hope you enjoy this discussion. Let me now introduce Tiffany Thompson, who's a cultural strategist, artist, and producer who integrates creative imagination and collaborative execution to lead teams and bring ideas to life. She's the executive director at Comment Magazine and a former leadership analyst at the CIA, so that's quite a journey. Tiffany, welcome.
Welcome, new communion. Let go of your pain and burdens. Admission is free. Just confess you're a human with a heart open wide to new communion. Well, the darkness of night don't stand a chance. Fire and starlight starting to dance. Faces of friends all gathered round. Life in this moment, what's lost is found. Welcome, new communion. Let go of your pain and burden. Admission is free, just confess you're a human with a heart open wide to new communions. Well, we're building a home, breaking some bread, making the time to really listen. You are a mystery I wanna explore. Distant horizon, as close as the shore. Welcome, new communion. Let go of your pain and burdens. Admission is free, just confess you're a human with a heart open wide to new communion. Footsteps fade around us, but love has found us right where we are. Yes, the stars rage around us, but love has found us right where we are. Oh, storms rage around us, but love has found us right where we are. Sacro Cuore. Let go of your pain and burden. Admission is free, just confess you're human. Admission is free. just confess you're human, and the shot is free. Just confess you're human, with a heart open wide, with a heart open wide. Ooh, with a heart open wide. To do communion.
Tiffany Thompson, everyone, and I'd like to welcome Tara Isabella Burton.
So I'm here now to just welcome some more people, but thank you all for being here, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to our final panel, Ritual and Spirit in the Age of Disenchantment. We have a mild change from what's in the brochure. Unfortunately, Casper Turcoila was very ill and not able to attend this weekend, but we are incredibly fortunate that Matt Mittler, whom I will introduce later, but who is also doing the immersive theater, immersive experience afterwards, was very kindly willing to step in. So I'm delighted to hear from him and from all of you. So as we've been doing in the past, I will be inviting our panelists up one at a time, and then we will all speak together. So our first panelist today is Julian Carrón. Julian is a priest, university professor, theologian, and New Testament scholar. An educator of generations of young people, he led the Catholic movement, Communion and Liberation, for many years after its founder, Father Luigi Giussiani. Julian?
Thank you very much to Brandon for this invitation to this dialogue so rich as we have seen during these days about beauty, with all the implications that we have seen along the whole day, today and yesterday. The question that we have before us, can beauty save the world, was pronounced by Dostoevsky through Prince Masking in a context, cultural context different from ours. So our world is not Dostoevsky's world. What is the characteristic of this time that we are living now, in which we need to face this question? Just Taylor has analyzed the modern human experience in depth, seeking to understand how we perceive ourselves and reality today. In the contemporary landscape, said Taylor, many people find themselves in a situation of great loneliness. A profound question arises in their heart. What is the center of my life? What do I want to spend my life on? In a context completely different from that of the past eras, religious experience also takes the form of a common search, the emergences of people who seek, seekers of meaning, is what he called this bunch of people who are seeking for something else. We have seen in such a way in this dialogue. It is in the current context we must verify the salvific capacity of beauty, its transformative power. But first, we need to understand what salvation is that today's man is groping for. What salvation? Dostoevsky himself arises the question in the Brothers Karamazov. The ant knows the formula of his ant hill, and the bee that of the hive, but man does not know his own formula. Unlike all other living beings which have the resources to achieve their own ends, their goals, man is such a mystery that he cannot know his own formula. And nothing helps us to understand the mystery of man better than surprising him in experience. Leopardis, the Italian poet, testified to this. Not being able to be satisfied by anything earthly, nor, so to speak, by the whole earth, considering the inestimable vastness of space, the number and marvelous size of the worlds, and finding that everything is small and insignificant compared to the capacity of ounce of soul, man finds himself faced with a total disproportion between his desire for fulfillment and his ability to achieve it. In this disproportion, that triggers in man the search for fulfillment, the seekers. But what resources do humans to have to carry out his search? In order to discern if and what beauty respond to his thirst for fulfillment, man has within himself a resource with which he is endowed from birth. Baudelaire recognizes in his instinct for beauty. It is this immortal instinct for beauty that makes us consider the world and all its beauties as a reflection, as a correspondence of heaven. When a perfect poem brings tears to our eyes, these tears are a sign of exasperated melancholy. It is precisely this exasperated melancholy that still drives the search of the seekers Taylor speaks of. This instinct for beauty does not die out even in a world like the one we live in, but the use of this detector to intercept beauty, the instinct of beauty, is not at all mechanical, and it is not automatic. St. Augustine describes it masterfully. When we are trying to understand yesterday this question, does this beauty not appear to anyone who is fully endowed with senses? Why then does it not speak to everyone in the same way? It speaks to everyone, answered St. Augustine, but only those who compare this voice received from outside with the truth within themselves understand it. How then we can recognize beauty? Man recognizes beauty when we have listened these days. What it happens? The recognition of beauty is facilitated by the impact of the heart, which is not mere emotion, but calls into play all of man's reason, as Ratzinger said after a Bach concert conducted by Bernstein. Those who have listened to this know that faith is truth. It's true. It's the music. In that music, there was such an extraordinary force of reality present that Juan realized no longer through deduction, logical deduction, but through the impact of the heart that this could not have originated from nothing, but could only have been born thanks to the force of truth that is actualized in the composer's inspirations. When man encounters beauty, it is a recognition that is revealed in experience. beauty, of truth, is what makes me say, it is the truth. Beauty has an attraction that makes recognition easy, but not all manifestations of beauty have the power of attraction to respond to the need of salvation, to our loneliness. Today, the diversity of proposals shows how difficult it is to find a beauty that meets the urgent need in human beings. What are the characteristics that must beauty have in order to be able to save? The first characteristic it must have is to be present, uncountable in history. Otherwise, it cannot respond to the search for meaning. Has to be correspondent to our heart, to all the desire, all our instinct for beauty. But not every beauty that we can encounter in reality has the capacity to correspond. Many of these beauty have the ability to make us gasp. But after a while, everything fades away. The question is, what can answer to this desire of salvation? The salvation that beauty must bring has to face the real question of life, that is death. Without the ability to face the greatest threat, hunger over humanity, beauty will not even serve to sustain life in a consistent way. Therefore, we cannot separate what gives meaning to life from what was it needed to face death. Because that's the same. So only one person, like St. Paul, can say, for me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. The same present that is able to answer, to sustain life, is what can make avoidable to look at the death. But the real question is that this beauty exists. We live in a state of radical powerlessness because we have seen in our dialogue that we cannot grasp what our heart, what the desire of beauty have our heart. But we cannot deny the category of possibility, that there is something beyond, except at the cost of renouncing itself to reason, to this hungering for something else, longing for something else. For this reason, Wittgenstein said, light must enter, so to speak, through the ceiling. This striving for the absolute, which makes me earthly happiness seem to pity, seem to me wonderful, sublime. But if I fix my gaze on earthly things, unless God visits me, to ask ourselves whether God has visited us is to ask ourselves whether this beauty exists in the present. This is the claim of Christianity, because Christianity claims that the beauty we all grow for has become flesh. To verify the truth of this claim, we must encounter this present in reality, because Christianity, being a present reality, has as its instrument of knowledge the evidence of an experience. We will only know that this statement is true when we encounter people who are full of nostalgia, as are described by Nicolas Cavasilas. This man, full of nostalgia, has been struck by the bridegroom himself. He himself has sent a burning ray of his beauty into their eyes. The powerful nostalgia they carry in their heart speaks of the beauty for which they are made. The breath of the wound already reveals what the narrow is, And the intensity of the desire gives a hint as to who it is that has shot the dart. Ratzinger comments this test of Kabbalah with this word: beauty wounds. But in this very way, it calls man to his ultimate destiny. What Kabbalah affirms has nothing to do with superficial aestheticism and irrationalism. Being struck and conquered by the beauty of Christ is more real and deeper knowledge, we have talked about these days, than mere rational deduction. To disdain or reject the blow caused by the correspondence of the heart in the encounter with beauty as a true form of knowledge impoverishes us and widens our faith as well as theology. We might rediscover this form of knowledge. It is pressing need of time, as we have said. The encounter with beauty can become the blow of the dart that wounds the soul, and in this way opens its eyes so that now the soul, starting from experience, has criteria for judgment and is also able to evaluate arguments correctly. But where it is this present and finished? What is lacking is not so much the verbal culture of repetition or proclamation. Perhaps inconsciously people today are waiting for the experience of encountering people for whom the fact of Christ is so present that their lives have been changed. It is a human impact that can shake people today. An event that echoes the initial event when Jesus looked at and said, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I am coming to your house. A human impact, a human diversity in the encounter with a presence, the only thing that can answer to our thirst of beauty, that can really fulfill our need. Whatever can be the experience of beauty that everyone has, each one of us is constrained to think inside himself whether the experience of beauty that everyone has in his life is able to answer to the loneliness about which speaks Taylor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Deji Ogunnaike. Deji is an assistant professor of African religions at McGill School of Religious Studies, who specializes in traditional Yoruba religion.
And well, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see some old friends here. And Brandon, thank you for the invitation. I realize I'm a bit of an odd duck in most rooms. I'm sure most of you, when you agreed to come here, probably didn't think you would be hearing about Yoruba mythology and cosmology, but I will do my best to make it worthwhile for all of you by the end. So as you can see here, I'm going to start us with some Yoruba cosmology. I myself am ethnically Yoruba. So the first place to start is the kind of binary nature of the whole cosmos. You have kind of on the top, it's oftentimes imagined as a calabash. You have Orun, which is usually translated as the sky or heaven. There's no real strong division between the material and the immaterial in the Yoruba cosmology. And it's a bit like a celestial pre-existence that exists outside of space or time, right? It can also be an existence because it's happening at the same time, at least from the perspective of Aye, which is the earth or the world in which we all live. Orun is the domain of Olodumare, or the supreme being or God, also deities who are called the Orisha usually, and then also those who are waiting to be born. So people, any kind of entity really has some kind of existence in Orun before it then comes down to Aye. And Aye is a bit more chaotic, it's perhaps a bit more disordered, but that makes it actually the most dynamic. And so people and deities or other kinds of entities come to Aye to accomplish some kind of purpose. So you can conceptualize it as like an immaterial and a material level of existence, but that interpenetrate each other. You can't really disentangle them. What you do in one affects what happens in the other. Orun is given preference as kind of ontologically prior to, right, or superior to everything that happens or has existence or purchase in Aye. And I love this image in particular because oftentimes in Yoruba mythology, Orun is described as separated from Aye by either an ocean or a river, and then there's also a tree. And then when people pass from one to the other, you kind of forget what existed before, which is why we sometimes have difficulty perceiving the reality of Orun. And we'll get to that in just a bit. A very important concept to be able to understand here is also Ashe. It's oftentimes translated as power, authority, sacred life force. I like to call it just the ability to affect change in the world. It's fundamental to all of existence. You could conceptualize Olodumare, or the Supreme Being, as completely undifferentiated Ashe. If you're familiar, with Catholic theology, God is just being in its essence, right? This is kind of the notion of Ashe. All of it has to come and flow from Olodumare as the kind of ontologically supreme essence or being, and then it flows down to ontologically lesser beings. So starting from Orun and then flowing kind of down into Aye. It can be given, channeled, cultivated, and you could use all kinds of other verbs, but again, flowing from those beings that are kind of superior to those who are perhaps a bit lesser. And absolutely nothing can exist or be accomplished without Ashe. It is what makes the world go around, and it is in and of everything. Ashe itself, however, is inherently neutral. You can wield it appropriately or inappropriately, not really well or poorly or, in kind of good or evil binaries, but appropriately or inappropriately. And this is where we start to answer with understanding those concepts. We can begin to look at the question of, can beauty save our world? Beauty is not unproblematically translated as ewa in Yoruba, but ewa or beauty means something a little bit different from what we might think of in English. It's a noun, but drawn from the verbal root wa, which means to exist or to be located somewhere, really to kind of have existence in Aye, right? It is, but it also is in time and space in a particular place or context. And the ability to transmit something's true nature, right, linked with its existence in Orun, appropriately and powerfully so people can actually experience it in Aye, is what beauty actually is, right? That is what ewa means. It allows all of us here to be able to perceive and see what that thing truly is or what it reflects most directly. And because the reality is primarily determined by the nature in Orun, its form in Aye is completely dependent on that counterpart that it has there, which is why you can't fully separate them, but they are at least slightly distinct. Because Aye itself is transient, the nature in Orun has to take different forms at every point in time and in space. So that means it can actually be quite diverse, but it doesn't mean that it can take any form that it wants, right? You can actually deviate from the thing's true nature itself, which then means that it's no longer quite as beautiful. Now, because its beauty is actually being true to the nature of the thing itself, it doesn't actually always have to be aesthetically pleasing, right? So something that might actually be very terrifying might actually be very appropriate. If it's supposed to give you an experience of fear, that thing is very beautiful. And I'm sure all of us have had experience watching, it's like a very sad scene in a wonderful movie. And you say, oh, that was beautiful. It didn't necessarily make you happy. It is pleasing in a certain sense, but it's only pleasing in the sense that it transmits something that you know is quite true, or you say, oh, it moved me. That means it has a lot of ashe. That means that it was itself very beautiful from a Yoruba perspective. One of the most important kind of theological and philosophical concepts is this one of ori, or destiny. Ori literally means your head, but it has much broader connotations there. It's oftentimes translated as destiny, but again, in a way that's a bit different from the English word. It's non-deterministic. It's very fluid, and it's much more like a kind of spirit double or a guardian angel. In essence, it's the correspondent of your nature in Orun. It is who you are as your cosmic self. And that is called your inner head, or your ori inu. Your physical head that you can see and touch and wash, and you can do its hair and all of that, is your ori ode, your outer head. But the two of them are very much linked. in ritual, if you do things with your actual head, and I've seen this done many times in Nigeria, where the Yoruba live, you do rituals to your actual physical head to manifest things or affect your inner head in Orun in various different ways. And I'll try to be quick because I know we don't have a lot of time. But in Yoruba mythology, there's this man here, Ajala, who's a very tricky potter. He lives in Orun and he molds heads out of clay. But he's a tricky guy, so you never know if those heads are actually very good or useful or appropriate, or perhaps less so. And there's a wide variety amongst them. You might look at them and think, oh, well, this seems to be crafted quite well, but perhaps on the inside it's very brittle and it can't stand up to a lot of resistance. And so if you have a head like that, your life is actually going to be quite difficult. No matter how hard you try, you might not be able to succeed in whatever it is that you're doing. But there might be others that seem quite plain and not very well adorned, but might actually be very, very effective, or very effective for specific purposes. And everyone, before you come down to Aye, in Orun, you go to Ajala's workshop and you choose a head. And you make this choice, usually largely without knowledge of exactly what all of its contents are. But then once you've accepted it, you're given Emi, which is like life force or breath from Olodumare, and then you cross that river here, or you pass under that tree and you come into Aye. And once that happens, you forget actually what your head is. Children tend to remember it much better because they're not as distanced from Orun. But as you go on in life, you kind of forget what your life is really about or what it is that you want to get out of it. And that's why you need to do a lot of rituals with your head or do divination and other things to try to remember what your true nature or self actually is. So a good life constitutes living in alignment with your Ori or following the guidance of your Ori Inu. And the most powerful force in your life is your Ori. It's not even one of the deities that you serve. I wouldn't say it's more powerful than Olodumare because Olodumare is everything. But apart from Olodumare, there's nothing that has a stronger impact on your life than your Ori. If everything else wants to try to get you to do A, but your Ori says B, your Ori will win every single time. But it's not also individual. In Yoruba cosmology and society, identity is primarily communal first and individual second. So every group of people, this conference has its own Ori. Every society, every country, every religious group, every occupational guild has its own kind of collective Ori. And everybody, every group, every individual is supposed to try to follow it as closely as possible. So if you're familiar with the Lord's Prayer, this reminds me of it every time I go to Mass, on earth as it is in heaven. This sums up a great deal of what Yoruba ritual practice is actually supposed to be. There is an order kind of in heaven that cosmically guides and sets the whole world in right order. And then the whole point of life, in essence, is to try to orient them appropriately to each other so that Ashe can flow and make everything work the way that ideally it should. You can follow your Oris individually and collectively. So Iwa is the other critical one. This is the title of my talk here. Iwa lewa, sorry, it's a Yoruba proverb which says, character is beauty. Iwa is also derived from that same verb wa, to be, but character here actually means something more like the truth of what your nature is. So not the ability to transmit it, but just what it actually is. Bad Iwa is kind of like health. Generally speaking, it's valence positively, but you could have bad health in theory. Bad Iwa tends toward nothingness. It's parasitic on real existence, and it leaves you as kind of less of a person. If Iwa is existence itself, if you have kind of corrupted Iwa, you have corrupted existence. And we say that all the time in common parlance in Yoruba. If somebody behaves really poorly, you say, oh, huwa buhuku, like you have bad corrupted character. You would say, kishe enia, like you're not even really a person anymore because you're no longer behaving as a person should. Right? You've lost the nature of what a person is. And so while many values are indeed universal, there's a particular articulation for every person and every group of people. The Iwa of each person in each group is different, and so you need to try to remain faithful to that. I have an older brother who's also an academic. He has a very hot temper, which generally speaking in Yoruba context is not a good thing. You want to try to temper it. But there are absolutely instances where you need someone who says, enough is enough. I'm not going to accept this. We have to take action and do something. I tend to be much more laid back. And it works very well having the two of us together because in the moments when I'm not sure that I have it in me to stand up to this, well, he's ready to go all the time, right? So you need to know what your Iwa is and then appreciate each one for what it has to offer and then make sure that they're present in the right moments and that you can step back when necessary. So putting them together now, Iwa lewa. Character is beauty. Your good character directly translates your ori inu, or your cosmic self, into Aye. And it's the same artistic process as wood carving. And sorry that this is listed twice there, in that you need to shape the wood. Its essence is already there, right? It's inside the wood, but you need to know what form it is meant to take. And then you carefully, over time, start to mold it into the shape that has always been in there, at least in potentiality. Iwa is also personified in Yoruba mythology as a really wonderful woman. She's very beautiful, but she's incredibly difficult to live with. She makes your life very, very hard. And anybody who's tried to hold very high moral character will know that in this world, in Aye, it makes things very, very difficult for you, and there's no way to get around it. But fascinatingly, every time people decide, oh, I don't want to deal with Iwa anymore, their lives instantly get much worse. So you don't really have a choice. It's going to be hard with her, or it's going to be even harder without her. So there's a very real effect on the immanent world of beauty, and it's not just in the kind of transcendent realm. Okay, there are all of these things happening in Arun. No, beauty is actually bringing it in and giving the right character to the matter, the beings, the things in Aye. And expert practitioners like this man here, he's a high priest of an Orisha deity called Orishanla. He's the oldest, most senior deity of creation, peace, contemplation, compassion. The expert practitioners at the end of their lives usually come to not only behave, but physically look like the Orisha that they serve. And I've noticed this amongst many practitioners that I've worked with. This man, when you see him, you can tell he's a patient. He's a very kind person. You can almost see it in his face. And everybody who meets him leaves with exactly the same impression. Another priest that I know, people say, yeah, when I meet him, this is exactly what I imagine Shango looking like, or how he would dance, right? And that kind of. So the ritual process is art or beautification of human beings, but also of the entire world. All action or ritual, again, there's no sacred or secular division in traditional Yoruba society. So all action is ritual. It shapes our physical world, including ourselves and our place in it. So from the food you eat, the clothes you wear, songs, dances, stories people tell, material culture, everything channels a particular type of ashe into the world. And I think this is one of the reasons why Yoruba art are some of the most celebrated and widely known in Africa, because it's so central to what life is all about. Everything that you do in life is supposed to be an artistic process, which means it's highly developed and it's highly theorized and highly, highly valued. Artists are viewed, in essence, very much like priests, because they connect people in Aye with Arun. Without that artistic process, you, in essence, get kind of cut free of your cosmic anchor, and life becomes very chaotic. So people and our lives, as I mentioned before, are like wood. The carver, like this is actually a friend of mine in Ilefe, the center of the Yoruba cosmology. You shape and refine us in alignment with our cosmic principles to reveal our latent beauty. And so you can consider the carver kind of like the ori inu, which is constantly trying to bring the wood of our external selves, our outer selves, into alignment with this vision of who or what we can actually be. So to come back to the initial question, can art save the world? From a Yoruba perspective, that's the only way divinity can enter our world. If you want to consider the world needing to be saved, which I think most people today, regardless of your political orientations or lack thereof, most people would kind of agree on that. It needs to be saved because Aye is out of alignment with Arun, and there's no other way to bring them back into alignment. Aligning the two for the appropriate flow of Ashe is the very definition of what beauty actually is. So salvation, which is a bit of a strange term or concept in that cosmology, but if you were to refashion it in a Yoruba worldview, salvation kind of is beauty. There is no real difference between the two of them. Beauty is the very purpose of life. And anything other than the beautiful will actually make that rupture much, much worse. And the loss of what's beautiful makes us forget even further what our ori is. And I'm sorry that it got rendered a little bit strangely down at the bottom, but this is a song from a myth, a divinatory verse that speaks about ori and its place and relationship with Iwa. In Yoruba, it says, Biori ba fe Iwa. If Ori marries Iwa, Biwa ba fe Ori. If Iwa marries Ori, Aye agunrege, life in the world will be well-ordered and pleasant for all of us. And so that's my answer to this question, reframing it a little bit differently, but I hope it offers you a decent way to think about it, and then also to kind of reconceptualize what beauty is and the kind of really central role it plays in all of our lives, not just the Yoruba, but a way that we can see it kind of functioning in all of our worlds, collectively and individually. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Matt Mittler. And as I mentioned before, Matt is also leading one of the immersive experiences after this, which is a sort of a immersive theater workshop. So if you're interested in that and you've not already signed up for a workshop, get in touch with me or him or one of us. So Matt Mittler was initially trained in humanistic and existential psychology before discovering the healing potential of theater. He has had the good fortune to study with such masters as Jerzy Grotowski and Eugenio Barba in theater, Carl Rogers and R.D. Lang in psychotherapy, and John Houston and Michel de Salzman in more esoteric disciplines. Integrating these pursuits has been a lifelong process. Matt's primary focus has been on Dzeici Theater, founded in 1997, an experimental theater ensemble dedicated to a search for the sacred through the medium of theater. Matt, come on up.
A different perspective to stand here before you all. A little humbling. I'm an interloper. I wasn't originally on the list, but it's a good role to play, an interloper. I feel that one of my roles in life is that of the trickster, and sometimes it's necessary, whether we like it or not. It happens. Is Deja still here? You still here? One of my company members is a Lukumi high priest, so we've had a lot of interaction in that world. Something happened when Tiffany sang, our musician that began this afternoon discussion. I felt something. I don't know if you did, but if you can go back a couple of minutes, what was different about that? For me, first of all, Tiffany started in the wings. She didn't come and take the stage and then, no, I'm going to do something. She began in a subtle, involving way. And then she wasn't just using her voice, but she was alive in the moment. Emotions were flooding up and down, rippling up and down her. And I was riveted. And I sensed a certain kind of stillness and quiet, which I have not experienced today. I love, the vocal quartet earlier, but this is something else. What makes it different? Now, for me, that's my life's search. But maybe you got a little piece of something there that can help inform you. What's different about that? So, Dzeichi's been around for a long time. I've been around for a while before Dzeichi. It's Dzeici Theater. Dzeici is the Polish word for children, because I studied theater in Poland and I wanted to make that homage. We are always looking for what can be more real, what can be more efficacious, what can contribute to our own transformation on a personal level. So, can beauty save the world? I don't know. But I do have data that says beauty can save me. I have experienced that. And not just theater, but theater specifically. And I can't do it alone. I need to brush up against other human beings, other bodies, other forces, not just human forces, but natural forces, man-made forces. Some are very helpful. Some are very difficult. Some are destructive. But I need to learn under all those different conditions. So Dzeichi is an experiment. It's still an experiment. We're always refining. We're always changing things. When we first began, there was a group of people who all wanted to work a certain way that I had brought from my work in Europe. But I should go back to how I first began doing this. I had been in fine art, and I loved creating art. And I loved working in a room with other artists, the energy of other artists, but I was not communicating with other people. I was communicating with myself, and I was working through all kinds of teenage angst and other things. But there was something missing. And I had friends that did theater, and I would experiment with that. And I felt, wow, there's a community here, like you've written about, Tara, and it's alive. But I was also incredibly fearful. I liked to just sit and draw or paint or sculpt. I didn't want to be out in that world. So I went to study psychology, but stayed in with art and with theater. And right before I went to university, I was in a car accident where a doctor pronounced that I had 90% chance of dying. And obviously I didn't die, but I was disfigured. I was somewhat blind. I could not speak for a period of months. I was grotesque, and I was even more introverted than I'd been as an artist. And I saw an ad for a theater company forming, saying they did Gestalt theater. I know, well, maybe I can get credit for this. And I came to them, and they were jumping around in a church. They called it the Holy Theater Company. And I couldn't do anything. I was just absolutely terrified. And they accepted me. And I stayed because I felt, I need this. I need this. And I stuck with it. And it had a very healing effect. I mean, I still have lots of fuck-ups. But I began to interact with people on a very deep level. There were tears. There was some blood sometimes. There was nudity. And it was very, very raw. And that sent me on a journey to go to the source of this kind of theater, which was in Poland with a man named Jerzy Grotowski. And I did study there, and I worked with this company. I worked with this lead actor. And I had experiences that I couldn't talk with any other people. They were so, beyond transcendent, but also really disturbing. Some people had nervous breakdowns. It didn't seem like the company was responsible for how people entered and how they exited, how they came back to the world. Then I left there and I went to study with Carl Rogers, which was the opposite. It was not changing you and doing things and confronting you. It was like, well, we're going to do something. It's up to you. That's how he talked. And people still had nervous breakdowns. It was still really, really, really intense. But what I learned from him was allowing for things to happen and not just making and provoking. And he did take care with how people entered and as best as he could, how they exited. So when the possibility of Dzeici came along, it was important to me that we really supported each other in developing and what that would mean from show to show, day to day, year to year, through our lives, not through the art. The art was the vehicle. So someone's parents die, someone's child dies. These all happen. How do we bring that into the group? How does this community, and it is a community, support all the facets of life? Everything, not just beauty, ugliness, horror, devastation. Can we allow that to come in? And we do, and we work with it. And if you stay in the company, you know you don't leave it at the door. You come in and you go, whoa, and we will work with that. Sometimes it verges on psychotherapy. That's fine. Sometimes it's let's put it into the text and do it that way. Sometimes we'll just sit silently. Sometimes the entire rehearsal day will be spent discussing a difficult issue. Remember, after 9/11, we were doing a piece called Fool's Mass, where we're all village idiots during the time of the plague, and our priest has just died of the plague, and we're left to do the Mass on our own. And I said, how do we deal with 9/11? It's right next to us, basically. We're in New York. And we came up with, let's make one of the characters Islamic. And as a group, we agreed upon that. And we did that. So this thing about taking our lives as our fuel, as the food for our art, our personal lives, but also the lives and life of the world around us, is always this question in our work. We will go long periods of time without performing. When we do perform, it kind of is like lighting an ember underneath what we're doing, and something more intense happens. There's more at stake. So as responsible as we are for each other in the group, we have made an effort. How can we be responsible for an audience? It's not just the curtain goes up and we're there, ta-da, curtain comes down and we go, ah, that was great. Somehow or another, we greet people, we bring them in, we change the relationship, we help them to come in, maybe in a reverent state, maybe in a joyous, laughing state. And when they exit, we also do something to prolong it. Maybe we'll be on the street corner waiting as they walk by, just so they remember a little bit more, so they contain the experience. There are two kinds of transformation that I see. One is change of state. Oh, we had a good time. what's for dinner. And the other is change of being, which is something is deposited. And then if you're lucky, more is deposited and builds upon that. But the differentiation is a life's work to discern that. And we are interested in change of being. So if it does not contribute to change of being, we are actually will not go near change of state. We do not have a curtain. We do not take applause. What happens if you don't applaud? What are you left with? There's an African saying that applause breaks the spell. What are you left with? So here we are in this room, and this ritual is happening here. It's a ritual. Someone speaks, people listen, next person, there's applause. I didn't get up here knowing anything that I would say. I mean, I have a world of things to draw upon, but I have like 1 or 2 minutes left. But I want to be present here, right now. I want to see your faces. I want to be with you, maybe to reach, maybe to feel you, because an audience affects a performer if you're open to it. If you're just looking at your music, you don't know what's there. So how can my work be our work? That's always my question. And what am I responsible to? You know, what is the higher? What is the lower? I want to be in relationship to the higher. Is there a higher? If I can be very still, there's always a higher. I can look out the window, there's a higher. I can look inside and there's a higher. But then I don't want to deny the lower. How can I be responsible for that too? There's a ladder principle. If I want to climb the ladder, I have to help the person under me take my rung. That's the work of Dzeici. That's my personal work. People in Dzeici agree with that, that aim. And thank you for giving your attention. And don't applaud, please. See what it feels like.
Thank you so much to Matt. Our final speaker today is Mauro Magatti. Mauro is a full professor of social theory at the Catholic University of Milan. His main research interests lie in the relationship between the economy and society, and in recent years, he has focused on the notion of social generativity. He edited the book Social Generativity, A Relational Approach to Social Change, which is published by Routledge in 2019, and more recently, Macchine Celebi, Meccanizzare l'umano o umanizzare il mondo, from Mulino 2025.
As everyone, thanks for inviting me. I beg your pardon. I like to speak without reading, but my English language is not so strong, so I have to read. I hate it, but otherwise I cannot do my arguments. I basically will go through 3 steps. The first step is the disappearance of the term spirit. And I think that when we talk about beauty, we cannot talk about beauty without thinking at spirit. The word spirit has almost vanished from the contemporary cultural landscape. Few people today have a clear idea what spirit refers to. Other terms, mind, brain, emotion, have taken its place. Within the broader framework of modern rationalization, this is hardly surprising. Modern disenchantment, involving the abandonment of the tensional dialogue between reason and faith in the Western tradition, this is the basic argument of Ratzinger, has progressively restricted reason to ratio and instrumental rationality, as we all know. Combined with the rise of individualism, this evolution has turned the spiritual experience into a purely subjective affair, but useless for the social organization. We don't consider spirit useful for the social organization. Digitalization is now radicalizing this tendency in 2 decisive ways. First, artificial intelligence embodies, in a sense, Leibniz's dream, a world in which we no longer need to discuss, we can calculate. This is Leibniz's dream, and now we are there. With the triumph of numbers over words, of syntax over meaning, digital machines compute without understanding. precisely because they lack spirit, with all the problems which are emerging, like, for instance, AI hallucination, or more interestingly, what has been called epistemia, a condition in which linguistic fluency is mistaken for epistemic reliability. Second, digitalization dissolves the link between cultural artifacts and reality. Surrealism has become a distinctive feature of contemporary social life. There is no longer a shared and stable idea of the real. In the digital hyperreality, a new kind of enchantment is rapidly emerging, one entirely detached from any reference to reality or to its rational counterpart. Think, for instance, at the fake news. The result is what Bernard Stiegler called symbolic misery. Everyone communicates, yet no one understands. Cultures are in fragments and become easily manipulated. Simply give a look at the current state of our public spheres, polarized and emotional, no consistency, truthfulness, or rationality. Welcome to the bubble modernity, which is conflictual, of course, and full of hate. Second step, the symbolic nature of nous and the aesthetic experience. It's because the modern reductionism has now reached its entropic climax that the theme of this conference is so relevant. As Ernst Cassirer, a Polish philosopher, argued, nous, that is thought, flourishes in the dynamic tension between reason, detached, precise, orderly, conceptual, and spirit, open, intuitive, affective, prelinguistic. To put differently, with Pascal, between esprit de géométrie and esprit de finesse. Human thinking, therefore, is not merely rational. It's symbolic. It involves spirit in its tension with reason. And the notion of tension is very important in terms of Romano Guardini view, that is, this is a polarity which cannot be solved. Mircea Eliade described spirit as the vital force connecting body and transcendence, deeply connected with the ritual experience. In his definition, there are three crucial elements. First, spirit is intimately tied to the aesthetic experience. In Greek, aesthesis, perception through the senses, which keeps together body and mind. Spirit is deeply involved with the body. It's not something which has nothing to do with the body. Second, it's a specific way to knowledge. Raymond Panicard says that the spirit is the third eye of the human being, beyond reason and the physical one. Third, spirit is not just an individual experience. Many people stress this point. It can also be shared, especially through rituals. That is what religions usually do. Spirit, therefore, is a structural component of human thought, intrinsically linked to beauty, meaning, ethics, and truth. When Immanuel Kant evokes the starry sky above me, he is reminding that the aesthetic experience of beauty, the openness to wonder which conveys the idea of possibility, hope, perfection, compassion, is constitutive of human thinking. Though not rational in the strict sense, it cannot be excluded without impoverishing our noetic capacity. Aesthesis, by the way, has four main features. First, reconnect subject and object involving fusion, immersion, pleasure. As Armut Rosa, a German sociologist, say, it resonates. Second, move out, decenter the self, making him receptive to the context. Creativity is deeply connected with aesthesis. Third, transcends rules, revealing the hidden, unexpected, mysterious, hopeful side of our experience. And fourth, highlight forms that is the prelinguistic, non-conceptual dimension, which are essential elements of thought. In short, aesthesis, revealing the living presence of meaning in the world, is the condition of possibility for symbolic elaboration, which is the distinct features of human intelligence. That is, it's impossible to think without keeping in mind that thinking is symbolic. It's not just rational. And this is dramatic for our contemporary society, because we have split the dimension of the reason and the spirit. And so we are in a great mess. The last point, beauty can save the world. Well, maybe, if spirit is rehabilitated. For this reason, the reason that I just stressed, speaking of beauty today is not a luxury, but a necessity. Apparently, beauty is, in our world, is everywhere. Everyone is looking for it. But the problem is that beauty, exploited by economic and political interest, is reduced to a purely individualistic, consumeristic experience. Therefore, its power is deactivated. The crux of the matter is to recover the tensional relation between the two poles of our noetic capacity, reason and spirit. This statement has a clear implication. In the digital era, it's the duty of the human being, that is us, to recognize and strengthen spirit. Failing this goal carries tragic costs. The reductionist logic of digital rationalization ultimately will threaten life. This is not just the matter that machines are not bad. They become harmful because we, the humans, have built them in a reductionist way. So it's our duty as humans to develop what is not in the machine. And what is not in the machine, a digital machine, the spiritual side of our thinking. It's our responsibility, yes. It's our responsibility as living beings to socially cultivate what machines, which are not living entities, can never possess: interiority, resonance, and openness to meaning. Designing a new social world where these dimensions may flourish. Hence my conclusion. Practices of silence, contemplation, wonder, slow looking, prayer, not only as individual exercises, but as shared collective experiences, must be consciously cultivated and renewed through religion, art, nature, with time and spaces dedicated. I get the term beautification through rituals. We need to beautificate, in a sense. In the age of artificial intelligence, a crucial task is to build a society capable of thinking more. That is, one that rediscovers the lot of spirit, of the aesthetic experience, of beauty, at the heart of the human thought. And I like to conclude with a quote by Robert Musil, who wrote, "In my opinion, the current state of the European Western spirit is not one of decline, but of an unfinished transition. Is not one of excessive maturity, but of immaturity." Thank you.
If I can invite all our panelists up. Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. I'd love to start by posing this question sort of ideally to all of you, certainly to each of you. Something that I've been wrestling with is, if we do think of beauty as a bit of a bridge toward the infinite, what happens when we cross it? Which is to say, and Matt, I'm thinking in particular about theatrical ritual here, something that's sort of does not have an attached set of theological assumptions. But what does it mean, or how should we think metaphysically about the fact that it just works, that it works, let's say certain kinds of ritualistic experiences of beauty work outside of, say, a particular liturgical or context or a context associated with one organized religion? Is there a point where ritual gets us to a certain point, but from there we need to work it out? Is there a point at which beauty can get us somewhere, but it might get us to a bad somewhere, or to a sense of the infinite, where there are metaphysics we might not just reject, but take moral issue with it? How do we make sense of what's on the other side, allowing for if we allow for, or if we grant that beauty does bring us into some concept of the eternal? Matt, do you want to start?
Yeah. Well, first of all, before theater, before religion, there was ritual. And it's what I'm interested in getting back to. I mean, for me, if I go to any kind of religious service, it's theater and it's ritual. It could be bad theater, but it's still theater. I think for me, I need to prove that there's something possible. So the first thing is, am I changed by this? If I'm the priest, if I'm the pastor, if I'm whatever, am I affected by this ritual? Am I a different person from it? And not just for a moment, because there's been a lot of talk about change, transcendence, but this change of being, and this change of there's level of being and there's quality of being. So the change where I applaud and I walk out is one thing, but the change where something carries with me is something else. So how to help whoever comes to the church or the theater or wherever something is happening that has this ritual quality to it, how to assist the digestion of that something is carried, and it will be dropped immediately. I've seen even in a real ritual setting where someone does this prayer from another country and it's so amazing, and then there's a silence. And then someone else who's another spiritual leader stands up and goes, "Wasn't that great, everybody?" In some respect, it's destroyed. Another respect, it's, well, then how do I keep this? So it has to be a continuing question. If something's there, how to enforce it, how to guide it, how to keep it. You'll leave here. What do you bring with you? What do you bring with you when you get up out of your seats?
May I add a word? This is exactly what I was trying to say, stressing that the tension between rationality and spirit. This is the tension. This is the crucial element. What you are saying, we have to, in a sense, understand what is going on. The two dimensions are part of our capacity of thinking. And Ratzinger put in this way between reason and faith. It's too strict. It's not between reason and faith, between reason and spirit. And the problem is that we have separated the two. And so on one reason, you have reason, which become more and more strict. And now the machines are a sort of incarnation of this instrumental rationality. And in a sense, it's terrible. At the same time, they produce this surrealistic experience. And on the other, you have spirit, which is completely out from any connection with our reason. So it's terrible. So we are in a very bad condition. And I think this reductionist perspective of modernity now reach a crucial point.
To me, the real question is whether any rite or any gesture or whatever word we can use, a family meal, for instance, or a religious ritual, has the capacity to compel a human being to look beyond appearances, because otherwise we are entrapped. Only we can try with our energy. But the decline of human being in this moment, we can say, shows that it's not enough. Some kind of voluntarism, some kind of training. This is the real task of beauty. I like a lot the description of Jean-Luc Marion, French philosopher, that refers to beauty as a saturated phenomenon of beauty. He describes as a self-manifestation, manifesting excess, something that is so superabundant that help us to open our eyes, no? To enrich our experience in order to link reason and spirit, because the mission of the beauty is this openness to the whole human being. Without this, we can be entrapped always in this complaint about modern society without offering some kind of help to go outside of this situation. Beauty can be this tool, no, that offers us a possibility of grasping my inside, no, with certain energy, as we have listened these days, that always opens our eyes, open our mind, open our reason, open the whole eye to be really open according to the real nature of the reason, that is openness to the whole reality. No? At the end, this is the challenge we have in this moment in history, in which we can speak of like emergency of education. The emergency of education is the emergency of opening the eye in such a way that can enjoy with beauty, with music, with architecture, with a relationship, with everything in the reality. Because without this, many times, power or another kind of forces can destroy this possibility, trying to reducing the human being to only pleasure in the more weak sense, in meaning. We are doing for something greater than this, because otherwise we are uneasy with ourselves. We are this uneasiness with which spoke St. Augustine is our uneasiness in our time. For this reason, this irreducibility of people now that we can find in all these kind of seekers that are looking for something, is a search for meaning, is what we need to answer with the education and the beauty that is the tools for this education.
Something that came to me when you're speaking and it filtered around earlier is that beauty is not always something that we look for or seek. Sometimes we're going for something else and beauty arrives as a result. And then it's like a sacrament. And then how do we relish that? How do we savor that? How do we really take that in and digest it? I mean, just sitting in front of a painting for 15 minutes. I remember Ram Dass' meditation where we sat across from other people and stared into someone's eyes for an hour. What is it to really kind of take the sacrament?
Well, I think what came to mind for me immediately is I was just talking in one of my classes about it yesterday or the day before. I think part of the beauty of many African religious systems, whether they're indigenous, Muslim, Christian, is this strong resistance to the kind of bifurcation of binaries that the modern world very heavily tries to impose, and I agree, is completely responsible for the disappearance of spirit and its replacement with things that are much more kind of materially based. So, your Ori, it has its celestial component, it has its material component. but they're linked. You can't really get rid of them. And so the way I think I would reframe the question of, okay, well, what happens when we get to the other side of that bridge is that, well, if my ontology isn't split or my anthropology isn't split, I am the other side of the bridge, and I'm both sides of the bridge, and beauty or the ritual is really just the thing that allows them to come into alignment. And this is the purpose of everything, is integrating them, right? So if we're talking about reason and we're talking about spirit, well, we're really talking about the same thing ultimately, or we should be talking about the same thing, but we can do it poorly, which makes us forget the fact that they're the same thing. And that brings me back to the way most African epistemologies work, is that experience is how you know things first and foremost. And all pedagogy, at least in African context, is based on that principle first. Reality exists, and you can experience it directly. Then you can have your own subjective experience of it. Of course, it may vary from person to person, but it's based on that experience that you start to develop theories, right? Reason doesn't do anything on its own. It's a vehicle. It has to work with some kind of material, right? So, and that material is always the experience. So you have reality, you have your experience of reality, then you have your theories, your thought about it, and then you have your discourse about it. And then most African societies, they don't reject literacy. They say, well, literacy is one way of doing things. Orality is another. We tend to prefer orality because you reduce the spoken word to the written word, and you lose something in that transition. So you have this epistemological degradation of experience every way down. You have greater control over it every step down, and the modern world loves control. And I think that's also encoded in the kind of fears I hear from students and people I know say, well, I don't want to go to this ritual because I don't know what's going to happen to me. I'll lose control. I don't want to go to improv. I don't want to go to theater because I know there are things here and I can't predict and I can't control what's going to happen when I enter into it. When I get to the other side of that bridge, I'm actually afraid of what integration of myself will do, which is a scary thought to me, that we can become afraid of what integrating ourselves might actually do. So just to kind of sum it all up, when you started asking the question, it made me think of one of the quintessential rituals that happens in many, both Muslim, Christian, and indigenous contexts in Africa. People tend to call it spirit possession, led by a lot of practitioners. Now people tend to call it more spirit manifestation or incorporation, again, rejecting this idea that there's something outside that's coming in and taking possession of you and it's controlling you and you have to give up your own control. It tends to happen precisely at the moments where you have the most intense experience of beauty. So there's dance, there's music and sound, there are clothes, all of your senses are fully activated. And then something happens, and I've seen this, I don't know how many times, a person changes. And in the Yoruba cosmology, you say you're literally become divinized. That thing that is already inside of you gets elevated to a higher pitch. And now I don't know how to explain it, but I've seen it God knows how many times. Human beings can do things that under normal circumstances, they'd never be able to do. And you could say, well, is this going to break what our theology might have been? Possibly. I mean, it will change what you think is possible for sure. But that might be part of the point, is that there has to be a tension, right? When we experience something, that is what generates what we think, right? It doesn't just challenge it, but it generates. And I think the ability to integrate that is essential. So for somebody who's been quote unquote possessed or manifested a spirit, what they come to realize is that, oh, I'm not just the buffer itself, to invoke Charles Taylor. Right? I exist on both sides of that bridge. But if we don't embrace this notion of beauty, how will we know that a human being is more than matter? You have to actually experience that transcendent side of yourself and know that I am both sides of the bridge, and I can also be the bridge for myself and for other people. So I think my response to that is really just this issue of integration and resisting the bifurcation of these binaries. The binaries can exist, but that doesn't mean that they need to be mutually exclusive. They should reinforce each other.
Thank you all so much. I believe we unfortunately are out of time, but I'm so glad that I got to hear from all of you in turn. So thank you to our panelists. Please applaud everyone but Matt. Yes. For you, we have reverential silence. But thank you so much. And I believe I will stay up here and say a few closing words. So when reading and attempting to memorize Keats's poem Ode on a Grecian Urn, something struck me. To my mind, at least, beauty is truth, truth, beauty is only the second most interesting line about beauty in the poem. And sure, I think it gets at something. As so many of our speakers have already indicated, there's a rich philosophical tradition of seeing the pull of beauty as inherently towards that, which is true. Plato, of course, comes to mind. But it's complicated in the poem, I think, but by the fact that these lines are spoken, metaphorically at least, by the urn itself, albeit through the speaker's interpretation. That the urn indicates that truth is beauty, that it is all you know on earth and ever need to know, doesn't actually indicate that truth is beauty. It indicates only rather that this is the effect the urn has on the speaker. We could just as easily, if far less charitably, make the case that all ye ever need to know is evidence of beauty's distraction. To take beauty for truth is to assent to an aesthetic fantasy, that we are lulled into a respite from, as Keats puts it, human passion far above. It's a functional truth. It can make life bearable, but not necessarily an aesthetic one. But rather the line that interests me most, and I think it gets at something even more exciting about beauty, and it's one that actually makes me more confident about the relationship between beauty and truth, is one that's in the speaker's own voice. Thou, silent form, dost tease us out of thought as doth eternity. What does it mean to be teased out of thought? What does it mean to equate beauty not explicitly with truth, but with eternity? Several of our excellent speakers have already given us a few points to consider as we work out together over the next few hours and the next 3 years, if and how beauty can save the world. Well, I believe it can, but I'll get to that in a second. Elaine, in particular, I'm grateful for your work on the creative response that beauty engenders. And you brought up again in your panel discussion, Wittgenstein's remark that beauty makes the hand want to draw. I added that last night, but I want to also thank you, was it Julian, for the Kabasilas quote as well about being struck by the bridegroom. I think that image will also stay with me. And in both cases, there's a sort of an erotic and a generative desire to what beauty evokes in us, a desire that is analogous, as Plato has famously written in some of these, the Kabasilas, I think, makes particularly evident, to erotic desire. That which beauty evokes in us, and the teasing of Keats gets to this too, is an inchoate desire to participate in there being more. But more what? More of the beloved, more of the beautiful, more of ourselves? I think both erotic desire and generative desire are really helpful terms here. The desire that beauty evokes, as many of our panelists have already said, as I indeed think, is in part a self-abnegating desire, a desire that decenters us, as well as a generative one. But speaking as a novelist, I'm not sure I entirely agree that my own experience, beauty, is entirely self-abnegating. It's a little more complicated for me than that. Rather, when I experience something beautiful or something profound or sublime or whatever, under the beauty umbrella, when I want to write about it, which is my chosen method of response, it's not just exactly because I want to preserve it or because I want to reproduce a perfect copy of myself, but because I want to give expression to exactly this encounter, the sight of change. I am transformed by my relationship to beauty. You can think of it as a kind of impregnation. I want to give a birth to something that is both myself and that which I have encountered. The self that I express in my own writing isn't the self I was before that exchange, or that encounter, rather. I'm not sure beauty is getting very much from me in that. But what I'm always writing about when I write my novels are these moments of change, these epiphanies that in my lifetime at least have come out of or been evoked by beauty, whether it is the astounded beauty of crystalline order or the terrible beauty of what Burke has called the sublime. They are about and come out of and are written by someone who has been changed by a generativity that's not really self-reproduction. To be a bit simplistic about it, I don't clone myself in my books. But that being said, I think this encounter with beauty, this destabilizing, self-changing, if not entirely self-decentering, generative desire it evokes, this multi-part erotic urge to incorporate something else within ourselves and then make something new from it, does do exactly what Keats says it does. It teases us out of thoughts, out of our own thoughts. It opens us up. And it opens us up to creative partnership with the world, a world that if is comprised of anything at all is comprised of so much that is not us, other people, other patterns, other plants and animals and minerals and mountains and all the rest of it. And if I were to be so bold as to try to define beauty for my own purposes here, which is somewhat intimidating given all of you, but it would be precisely this quality of evoking both generative desire and self-abnegation at the same time. And I think that the worldview that such an experience evokes in us, that there is to something to creation, that there is something redeemable or even redeemed by reality, that it's worth living and making things and holding on to things, not just as a Schopenhauerian distraction before our inevitable pointless death, which I do think that the urn is an interpretation you could have of the urn in the poem. There is something in both us and the world worth reproducing. And also, and I'm so grateful to our panelists here for kind of reiterating this, that we need not have such a tight hold on the people we think we are, that this is the right worldview to have, that this is the worldview of eternity. And I think Charles Taylor was spot on in his remarks on yesterday's video to talk about the circularity of beauty, that the relationship of beauty and truth and the eternal proceeds from these first principles into which no one can reason you. It's a bit like telling an ineffectual joke in which we conclude you have to be there. You do, in fact, have to be there. And what beauty is, I think, is a bridge to get us to that there. And so at least that's how I sort of my beginning of this 3-year journey hypothesis is that this might be how beauty can save the world. Because I think beauty is an invitation. It is an invitation to eternity. It's a way that our affections and our desires, our impulses, and our erotic lives, like broadly construed, can be pulled towards what I sometimes like to call in my own work, this wager on meaningfulness, this sense that things are worth doing, that creation is worth existing, and even as trite as it may be, that life is worth living. Beauty gives us a reverence for both the creative process and creation itself that allows us to start thinking in reverential and self-decentering and generative terms, not in the language of use and possession, but in the language, as Charles pointed out yesterday, of symbols, of images, of meaning, of correspondences between things. And I think, as so many panelists said both yesterday and today, that what is preserved once you enter that circularity, once you're part of that circle, once you're beyond that bridge, is an openness to, a curiosity about, and a hunger for a richly textured reality, a reality better expressed by multiplicity, by metaphor, in which everything means and points to so much else. Maybe beauty is what makes you fall in love with reality. And we do live, and again, I'm grateful to our panelists for talking about this, an all too unreal era, an era seduced by unreality. Artificial intelligence, the attention economy, which I think is even a greater threat to us than artificial intelligence, the hyper reality of an internet culture in which our desires are so easily, if temporarily stoked and partially satisfied by a digital landscape that changes with us rather than causing us to change with it. All these, I think, have primed us and the generations coming up after us to encounter reality as just something entirely downstream of human thought and human imagination. And not even our own imaginations, which would be tricky enough, but rather the imaginations of those who stand to profit by the command of our attention. So my hope for the next 3 years of this inquiry, as a theologian and somewhat more selfishly as a novelist, is that by this project bringing together so many of you, scholars of beauty and practitioners of beauty and gatherers of other people in and through beauty, we might all think creatively in both an academic and an artistic sense about how to foster an appreciation for beauty in ourselves and in others, and how to provide more opportunities for beauty to bridge us into that circle of reverence, which I think is the starting point, though by no means the end, to a political discourse where something other than personal power matters. I still can't believe that this grant, this project is real, that it's happening. As a writer, as a theologian, as someone who's been so obsessed with beauty for most of my life that most of the good and plenty of the bad decisions I've made have been in pursuit of it. The fact that we all have this opportunity to think together and work together on this question often always feels too good to be true. So good thing we have 3 years. I'm very confident we'll figure it out in those 3 years. Definitely very confident about that. So I'm so grateful to all of you for being here at this conference, to Brandon for organizing this just amazing group of people, Lee for everything you've done to make this a material reality as well as just a reality on the noetic plane, to the Templeton Foundation and McGill. And I'm sure there's so many people I've forgotten, but for all of you for coming on this board to this project today and more broadly. So as you all embark upon your immersive activities this evening, and I do hope many of you join us for swing dancing after, it's going to be great. I want to invite you all to be as open as possible, as receptive as possible to every minute of your own encounters with beauty, to let beauty invite you across the bridge. We've had poetry and music already. I know some of you will be doing theater, which is what I'll be doing. Some of you will be in a nature walk. But I just want to sort of take a moment to think about how extraordinary it is that I know some of us are practitioners, some of us are thinkers or overthinkers. I often find myself kind of just always doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. I'm always, at the play analyzing why it's working and then trying to talk about this and getting distracted by the leaves out the window. But I think that's where we all need to be right now, just at the middle, both experiencing and thinking about, discussing, debating what it is we're experiencing.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for this episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with someone who would find it of interest. Also, please subscribe and leave us a review if you haven't already. Thanks, and see you next time.